Okay, we need to into the slide that updates. Okay, so
hi, Jamie.
Just so you know, we as soon as we can see each other, everyone can see us. So you might want to turn your camera off if you're still prepping.
Okay, I will.
People who are already logged in and ready to roll, but it looks like we're good to go.
Camera off. We're doing a few other prep items.
Administrative work. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna do the same thing, and yeah, we'll be back closer to 2 o'clock.
Sounds great. See you then.
October 19th update. Workplace strategy by Savills.
Oh, you know what? Also hit mute.
So can we just do a sound test first and make sure you like this sound?
Yeah, it sounds good to me.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. And then can you project and make sure that she likes the look of it as well?
Yeah, in a minute.
So on the agenda, we have Workspace. I've got a pretty ugly background here, Jonah. Did you do a check?
I'm going to do a quick sound check. Can everybody hear me?
This is Melissa. I can hear you.
Oh, good. Hi, Melissa. You must have been talking. I think I was on mute. I hope I was on mute. Because so Jeff said, oh, good. Jeff says he can hear us. So that's good. They said the picture looks a little blurry. Maybe it's, I don't know, screen resolution or something funny going on there. I'm going to stop screen sharing. Perfect. Well, we'll wait. We have a few more people jumping in, and then we will kick off. Oh, good. Marcy from CEO Offices can hear. Good. Awesome. Okay. It's 11 o'clock / 2 o'clock. I think we should probably reward everyone who's on time and get rolling. I see lots of people jumping in as we start going. So Melissa, thanks for joining us today. I'm going to do a quick intro and then turn it over to you. So thanks everyone for joining us. I always forget to, somebody asked, how do I mute myself? So before I intro, you are all muted. So we have to unmute you in order to hear your voice. So, so we may do that for Q&A. You can raise your hand and we'll tell you how to do that at the end. But for now, we can't hear any of you. So if you need anything, just type a question in the chat field and we will answer. So I am Jamie Russo, the Executive Director of the Global Workspace Association, and we are hosting the webinar. Melissa from PLASTARC is going to present, and I'm going to introduce her. And then we have a couple of sponsors for the webinar, and I had them up on the screen, but the feedback is they're a little bit blurry, so I will introduce them. So DaVinci is the first one, DaVinci Virtual Office Solutions. They are the leading provider of virtual office addresses, on-demand meeting space, and live receptionist services. They have over 1,200 workspaces in their network. They get 10,000 new virtual office clients per year, 30,000 meetings per year, and they deliver new communication revenue streams. And they've turned back over $30 million to the workspace industry through revenue from all of these different potential streams. So if you're interested in learning more about how to use them to drive more business for your virtual office business or meeting space business. You can reach out to them at msenn, M-S-E-N-N, at davincivirtual.com. And then One Systems, who's a big supporter of the Global Workspace Association, they are a single source IT platform for high growth businesses and shared workspaces. They really deliver kind of everything you need to run your shared workspaces, from phones to door management to space management, revenue management, you name it. They've got a really comprehensive solution. And so you can learn more about them. It's wunsystems.com. And we'll include their info in the follow-up email as well. And on to, oh, you know what? I just realized, here we go. Introducing Melissa. So I've heard Melissa speak a couple of times and really excited that she's going to do her presentation and discussion for this group because I think it's really relevant. So I'll give you a little background on Melissa. So she's the founder and executive director of PLASTARC, which is a consultancy dedicated to increasing the flexibility and desirability of space using social research and occupant engagement. She has also recently taken on the role of managing director of occupant experience at Savills Studley. And I love that title. I don't know if I've ever seen that before, but I kind of think we all, any shared space owner or community manager wears that hat. So Melissa's background, she's trained as an architect, both undergrad and graduate. And she learned along her journey that art is differentiated from architecture by occupancy. And she thinks of architecture as the art and science of occupancy. And she spent her career transitioning from the technical parts of architecture to the part of the building that impacts the person, or the human and the interactions that are made possible by what's carved out of the architecture. So I think this is really, really relevant to the shared space world as we all become super, super focused on creating really great experiences for our members. And so I've heard her talk about these concepts a few times. I also host a podcast called Everything Coworking, and she was a guest on that fairly recently. So if you go to iTunes, you can find that if you want to listen a little bit more. And this will be recorded, and we'll send out the replay links at the end if anybody on your team ends up missing the broadcast. So with that, I am going to turn this over to Melissa.
Hello, thank you, Jamie. Really appreciate the intro, the kind intro. I hope that I can live up to expectations there. What's on you? Oh.
No, you're good.
Okay. I'm here. So as I was saying, hope I can live up to expectations. This was actually originally presented, as Jamie mentioned, at WANI in New York. And we didn't get quite into the detail that I was hoping to in terms of talking about multisensory design and the way that we think of it as a way to structure our design of environments. But I do think it's a critical topic, particularly for co-working, shared office, serviced office environments. So appreciate Jamie's giving us a chance to go a level deeper than we've been able to do in previous conversations. So I'm just sharing our presentation today, which, as I mentioned, is really meant to be a bit of a deeper dive into multisensory design and how we use it as a way of structuring or thinking about the workplace experience. As Jamie has already mentioned, I am Melissa Marsh. And some of the things that we'd like to talk to you about today, I'll give a bit of an overview about who I am, who we are, and what we get up to. Talk to you a little bit about architecture. It's actually Archtober here in New York, and it's a month in which we celebrate architecture and its engagement with the public. So want to give a bit of a heads up to that. Then we'll talk about some kind of hot terms in the world of workplace at the moment, particularly that of culture and engagement. In our perspective, we can't really deliver on those until we've defined them. And then we'll be talking about this relationship between the consumerization of workplace and multisensory design, which from our perspective is a bit of a way to pair what it is, the needs that we're aiming to serve, and how we're doing so from a product perspective. So a bit about how I got here. I have a history in...
The slides aren't changing, so you have to You have to move through here.
Okay, rather than projecting.
Yes, when you do the full screen, it doesn't change the slide.
Sorry, we're just taking a moment for technical details here.
When you make it full screen, people can't see it.
1 second, team.
We'll be right back. There, that looks good. It's full screen.
Alrighty, we should be back on track now. I did realize that you weren't able to see the screen, and we'll be moving forward momentarily. All right, so a little bit about PLASTARC. We are a social research and people analytics organization. That means that we bring together a wide range of social scientists with designers, many of us actually having both of those capability sets in order to really focus on transformation in the built environment. One of the things that we've been coming up against, or having an opportunity to do so more and more, is to think about the shift or the transformation in what we do from space management to people enablement. As Jamie was saying, really this opportunity to think of space as truly focused on people, that architecture is that art of occupancy. And so if we're thinking about engagement, we're thinking about using architecture in the built environment differently, we might want to come at this from a product perspective. And in a product perspective, the first thing that we would think about is who is the customer? And so one of the reference points for me that I think is helpful to think about these things is that of the work of Don Tapscott, who a number of years ago wrote a book on the net generation. Significantly, this isn't millennials, this isn't Gen X, it is just the broader category of folks, most of whom are in the workplace today, that have a different merging set of values, in part because of the world that they've grown up in, and in part because of the technology around us. So I think that if we think of some of these words as how we think about the customer, that may help us in thinking about the design of the space. So as we shift from the design of the space for the space's point to that of enabling the occupant, some of the things that we hear in that vocabulary and around us is the objective of engagement. We talk about empathy-based design and thinking about how the design itself might carve out space for the occupant and be thinking about that occupant experience. We talk about the experience or the activity as a whole. Many of you may have heard data that shows that people are happier if they spend their money and resources on experiences rather than on objects. So that's another way of thinking about what we're doing in crafting the workplace. And then we also hear a lot about culture. Culture really being this sort of petri dish of the human experience in the workplace. And so one of the things that we think about, as I mentioned before, we kind of have to define things in order to be able to then address them from a design perspective. And so we think of a working definition of culture, which is that of the sum of all your people what they do, what they value, and how they act on those values. And so those values then turn into what you might consider as micro transactions or small activities that are happening in the workplace. And with many co-working organizations, serviced office work organizations, thinking about how they provide an environment for culture, there's so many things that we want to be attentive to. Everything from the person's experience to the ways that we deliver on that. So you might say then that architecture is more than a container for culture. It's an opportunity to really enrich and accelerate the culture, to do more than possibly any other business effort or strategic effort that we might do. Certainly those who are in the business of design, co-working, serviced office, they're invested in this. They're invested in the architecture. So it's a bit of preaching to the choir here, but I hope we can add an additional spin to that perspective. So a little bit about architecture. As I mentioned, it's Archtober here in New York, and so a bit of background in the world of architecture. An ancient Roman named Vitruvius, who you may know from the Lego movie, but he was certainly famous before that. Had coined a perspective that has really been the foundation of architecture as a profession for some time, which is really to say that the responsibility of architecture is that of providing for firmness, commodity, and delight. And so the first of those is firmness, really to make an environment that is strong, it is rich, it gives us confidence that that we are safe in the space. And then there is commodity, which is the usefulness or the utility of that space. It's the basis of programming. It's what we usually think of a lot at the early stages of design, thinking about how this space is going to serve the occupant from a functional perspective. And that's really been the focus of architecture from a workplace perspective for quite some time. But we are in a golden era, I might say, of architecture and of workplace design, and that is where we really get to focus on delight. Where for quite some time, offices have been spaces for accommodating computers, equipment, work processes, the kind of business infrastructure, and more, and I expect that it's what many of you are experiencing in your businesses, we have this opportunity to think of the workplace as a place of delight, and as a place of really getting to focus on the human experience. Furthermore, we now have more than ever before an ability to measure that delight. One of the ways that we are able to do so is through trace data that is coming from a mobile-enabled occupant experience. WeWork is just one of the organizations that we work with, and one of the things that I think they've been particularly successful with, but also a service provided by some of those sponsors that Jamie was mentioning at the beginning, is really to have this integrated digital physical experience where your space, where the office environment can be navigated by the occupant through a mobile interface. And that might be everything from guest registration to room booking to increasingly we're seeing co-working communities coming together much like freelancer unions of a previous era that are enabling an extension of benefits and starting to think about healthcare or other corporate style benefits being part of the co-working or serviced office environment. And so by having the occupant group, by having the customer using a mobile app, that gives us an opportunity to have more data than ever about what that experience is that's going on in the space. Furthermore, this is not just an opportunity for the management of the work environment, it's also an opportunity for thinking about the design of the work environment. Many of you may be familiar with Stuart Brand's work on how buildings learn, really a base model of how we think about things in the architecture and interior design world. And as I was mentioning previously, we are in this moment that there's an occupant that is enabling their environment, and that's giving us an opportunity to make that environment much more changeful over time, much more quickly changing. So I hope that that's a helpful background to what it is that are some of the bigger trends that we're seeing in the world around us, or maybe some of the things that we see as internal and external drivers that set up the demand then for this multisensory experience or this multisensory structure of thinking about workplace. So I'm actually going to go through each of these sensory components, and of course, those who may be familiar with sensory or even a reasonable knowledge of biology probably know that we actually have many senses. And the 5 senses that we learned about in elementary school are really just the beginning. But I think that in terms of a conversational structure, particularly at the intersection of user experience and design, that the 5 basic senses give us a good way of thinking about the occupant experience and the design thereof. So as I was saying, sight is kind of the first architectural or spatial sensibility that we think of, and there's many things that are layered into that sense of sight. It's certainly the primary for most people, but it's composed of many different things that happen in terms of our interpretation of the environment. It incorporates both the color and the color temperature. It incorporates daylight. Our eye is sensitive to that daylight, always adjusting to that. Sight is also the basis of how we think about the transparency of the work environment. For those of us who are lucky enough to be sighted, it is the way that we are able to recognize people and in the work environment, as well as other features of the work environment. Sight is also the basis of a number of features of biophilic design thinking. The idea that we need to have access to daylight and to nature, most of which is provided in work environments from a visual perspective. And then also the sight category includes the relationship between our eye and our energy levels. Many may have heard of circadian rhythm and thinking about the relationship between our body and when we feel more active and less active over the course of the day. And that has a lot to do with where our eyes are giving us information about the time of day. And again, one more reason why it's very important to have access to daylight for people not to be in work environments that fail to give them information about what time of day it is. That can actually disrupt our understanding of time, as well as our sleep patterns. If we're in a work environment that doesn't give us access to daylight, we may be having trouble sleeping. So these pieces between work and life really get quite intermingled. Another important piece for us is how we measure. So as you can imagine, as designers, or even yourselves potentially as client, as those who are employing designers, if we can't measure something, then we can't articulate what we would like it to be. For example, you say, I'd like a red cushion, and so we have that descriptor of red. So what we're going to be presenting in each of these slides or each of these segments is a little bit of information as well on units of measurement. So we can start to talk about through units of measurement for light, like lux, color rendering index, or UGR, the Unified Glare Rating. These are ways that we can start to measure the current work environment, to articulate the desired future work environment, and to be able to design to a more scientific specification going forward. So finally, on this category of site, we thought we might give you some information about how you might quite practically accomplish some of these things in your work environment. So you want to be thinking about access to daylight. You want to have a mix of vibrant and neutral colored spaces so that you give both stimulation and relaxation to the individual or the eye. You want to think through your space about where there is line of sight, both in terms of connecting to nature, as well as connecting to coworkers. And you also want to think about how persons are positioned in the space. Do they have a space from which they can see across, or see a number of different distances kind of composed of one another, or framed? So we thought it might be helpful to offer some practical applications for each of these segments. The next category is smell. Again, like the eye, which is collecting both visual information in a kind of photographic way, but also extra information that's kind of not necessarily what we think of. Similarly, so our nose is collecting both what we think of as smell information. It's also collecting flavor information. And you may also remember from maybe high school biology, it's collecting pheromone information. So it may actually be sensing others within our work environment in ways that aren't necessarily perceived as smell. And so I think that smell is actually really a great way to address a customer experience, a sensitivity to customer experience. It's something that I think can really be designed in to give significant differentiation. It's something that many organizations are not thinking as much about the smell experience. So if you're thinking about that, you're getting well ahead of the curve. We also see increasingly, some of you may have heard that smell is one of the biggest triggers of memory. And so if you think about the relationship between brand and a visual identity, as we think of, and then we start to see organizations that are increasingly associating a brand with a smell, and that's a great way of leveraging kind of who we are as humans and how we perceive and experience design. We also see some good work, particularly in the work environment restrooms, of being recognizing of these. And actually, that top image there is from Juicy out in LA, which I thought was quite brilliant. That the organizers there had thought to bring the scented candle and the great smelling soap into the restrooms, even though we were just at a conference center event space. So another neat thing about smell is that it doesn't necessarily need to be built into the architectural environment, although there are scent systems that can allow you to do so. But it's something that's actually kind of portable. You can add it readily to your work environment. And again, this is something that from a psychosocial level is really perceived by the customer or the occupant as being thoughtful when you've put these things into place. So again, how to measure some of the things that you want to be thinking about in having a conversation about these topics. So the European Odor Unit is an expression of odor intensity. There's also a unit called the OLF, and as you might imagine, those who when we're calculating predicted OLFs in an environment, that's going to include all the behavioral things that we see going on in the environment, sort of eating, your food services. Those who smoke generate more OLFs than those who don't smoke, as you might expect. But we really have a ability to measure what that kind of intensity level of the smell in the workplace is, and then increasingly ways to describe those smells. Maybe you could imagine similarly to how we might describe flavors of wine. Maybe that you have a woody or a floral or a citrusy experience there. And then finally, some of the things that you might be thinking about from a smell sensory perspective in terms of your own work environment beyond what I've already described here, is to think about how there might be different smells that enhance the time of day, whether that be coffee in the morning or beer in the afternoon, or other things that you can use to extend one's experience. As I mentioned before, using the smell to represent the brand. Weston of the Starwoods line might be an example that people know of in terms of having that white tea scent. You enter into the lobby of the Weston, and if you've had good experiences there previously, you might kind of think that you're on vacation as soon as you smell that. And then important to know that because of this association between memory and smell, that smell is contributing to perception of mood and atmosphere in the space, whether or not it's something that you're managing and thinking about. So the smell is there. Whether or not it's something that we're thinking about. So all the more reason to put it on your radar and to be considering it. So the next category is taste. And again, taste might not be as directly connected to the architecture, but we thought that we would talk about it in part because it is one of the 5 senses. But if we think about the total occupant experience coming into the work environment, likely early in the day, spending a significant amount of time there, one of the things that taste allows us to do is to have alternate ways of stimulating over the course of the day. So we want to think about flavors that are fresh, flavors that are diverse from one another. More and more thinking is going into what snacks are offered in the work environment, even what might be in the vending machine or what might be in the pantry. Many of you will notice, or many of you may be having water or flavored water. And those are all things that are contributing to positively enhancing that sensory experience and taking advantage of taste. In terms of how we measure taste, much like how I've described how we measure some of the smell features, there are a number of ways of measuring taste. And as I mentioned previously, sort of the design objective is to have variety and to bring stimulation to what the indoor architectural and workplace environment has a tendency to be understimulating. So we want to make sure that those foods are helping us extend our energy and experience. So as I mentioned here, some of the things to think about in terms of taste are providing healthy food. If you are going to provide food or beverages, that you provide those that have strong or significant flavors, often considered good flavors. And then we also recommend, and maybe this is also a little bit more connected to the well building standards or to the fitness in the workplace standards, which is really to make sure that people do have significant access to water, that we are having environments where it's culturally accepted and appreciated as much to be exercising and moving about, what we might call getting rid of calories together, as well as consuming calories together. And then one other thing that we think about in terms of taste in the workplace is that of really food and the ritual nature of food in terms of both eating together as part of what we do in the work environment, as well as using taste and food to connect across cultures and to bring aspects of the work environment and people experience together. So it might be intentional that I put sound sort of further back here in the list. I'd say that that much like the visual experience or the sight experience, which is probably the most talked about in architecture of workplace, I would say that sound is probably the second most talked about, and usually in a negative capacity. Data does show that that sound is one of the biggest points of frustration, I think, after ability to connect computers to printers, but that's a different topic entirely. Anyway, sound as being something that's more of a frustration to most people in the work environment, and I think by and large that has to do with how we've segmented and organized space over time, a trend to more open environment, a trend to spaces with harder materials that may be more reflective. We also, it's important to note, our acoustic needs change over time as we age. Our ability to distinguish the sound of someone who's nearby from someone who might be speaking in the distance, but maybe not speaking to us, becomes less distinguished. So we have more of that challenge as we age. But thinking about how we address sound in the work environment, certainly we want to be shifting to those softer materials, those more absorptive spaces. But we also see a shift from work environment which incorporates white noise or background noise to work environments that are bringing in something really much more like music, and thinking about truly designing the space as a soundscape and being as attentive to the positive aspect of the acoustic experience, rather than just trying to drown out the noise of others within the work environment with that white noise. So from some of our research here, you may be able to detect a restrooms theme in our work here. We've actually done a fair amount of research on identifying the importance of attentiveness to restroom design among occupants, and just happens to be that that's one more place where the sensory acoustic experience has an opportunity to play a role in the work environment. So probably better known than some of the other units of measurement, the decibel is the primary US measurement unit, and then from a kind of more deeper understanding of acoustics, we also have a number of other descriptors that allow us to talk about those waves, frequencies, patterns. Also, while we're here on sound, I think that we're also seeing more and more research coming out on topics of low frequency, what might be more perceived as vibration than sound, kind of the bass sounds that are in our working environments but come from equipment, and the extent that those are impacting our health over time. So I think that on this topic of sound waves, it's going to be something that we actually hear more and more about. So some ways to accomplish, do think about a mix of acoustical experiences. Really think about having spaces that are distinct from one another within your work environment, just like we talk about everything else, places to retreat to, places to get a different sensorial experience. Don't think about varying the music just as you do any other of the aesthetic or other elements. Think about sound or music that are appropriate to the atmosphere, how you might want to change it over the course of the day to encourage certain behavior in the work environment. And also think about ways for occupants to customize their sound experience within that work environment. Finally, on the category of touch, this is really to think about what are the ways that we experience the space from a touch sensory perspective, and keeping in mind that touch is kind of accumulated of what we might actually physically touch, the things that we might look at and imagine how they might feel to touch them. It's also composed of what our body sensory experiences, maybe when we sit in a chair or sit in a soft couch environment, that's a touch experience, any kind of skin sensor experience. It could also be used to include humidity and how we're using the air or air temperature within the work environment to create a sensory experience. Again, from our restroom research here, and some examples of where one might be thinking through how they're combining the actual sensory experience of what you might touch with that sensory experience of the things that you see, which are either those hard or soft features, and certainly the desirability of a mix of those. Thinking about the units around touch, and certainly that also includes temperature. In the midst of global warming, we've also had a number of articles this summer coming out in even the public media about the air conditioning of environments and the kind of the separation between where we are culturally at this moment in time and how spaces are cooled in the wintertime, heated in the summertime. You may or may not have seen this research coming out into the popular press this past summer about how ASHRAE standards, those ASHRAE standards are the standards that the building engineers use to determine what temperature and airflow that work environments should have. Those standards were established in the mid and early 20th century, and they're no longer how we dress. So they're based on men wearing three-piece suits and women unlikely to be in the workplace. So really the objectives that we might be aiming for when we're designing an architectural environment or an architectural environment from the past, and what is the current occupant and user, and what are their behaviors in that work environment, is something that's really changing. And that's why we do have suggestion that the physical work environment is in some instances becoming more out of sync with people's choices, preferences, and really comfort levels, to be quite straightforward. So then, in thinking of how we address touch or the skin sensory experience in the workplace, we certainly want to be thinking about ergonomics. One size does not fit all. We want to think about texture, and as I mentioned, even though those smooth, hard surfaces are popular from a visual perspective, we see a human desire for more of a rich or multi-texture work environment, as well as recognizing that these skin sensory components also have a relationship to how we learn and how we collect information within the work environment. So I hope that was useful or helpful to you. In good learning or teacherly mode here, I thought I'd go through some highlights or some takeaways. So greater demands from customers than ever before. We're seeing a more sophisticated user of space, more socially interconnected with one another than ever before, armed with cameras and sensory devices, so their occupants are even able to participate in that design experience with us. I hope that I have expressed that architecture and architects are a resource to those who are fitting out spaces. We are a licensed profession, and I highly recommend engaging ever, whether from ourselves or others. I promise at the end of the day it will both save you money on fit out and make you money in terms of being able to better perform from your occupant perspective. I hope we've talked a little bit about multisensory being a bridge between UX demands or user experience demands and the professionals, whether designers or owners and operators that might be delivering that. We kind of might think of it as establishing a vocabulary that would allow people or occupants to describe what they might like or how they might like things to be different. And I hope through our articulation of the units, maybe even units that you didn't know existed previously, that we've further reinforced one of PLASTARC's dispositions or even mission statements, which is that everything is measurable. Just a little bit of a recap on what we do at PLASTARC, which is to explore both in terms of research as well as design advisory, internal spaces, external spaces, and of course, to better understand the people who use and benefit from those environments. And we do have a unique set of strategic tools and methodologies of what we do as PLASTARC, as well as part of my roles and responsibilities in Occupant experience at Savills Studley that enable a rigorous deployment of how these characteristics are currently operating in your environment and what we might be doing to transform that over time. So I hope that has been helpful to folks, and I think that we're going to open it up to some Q&A, which I've made every effort to provide an opportunity to save time for.
Perfect. Thank you, Melissa. Yeah, so if you have a question, feel free to throw it in the chat box, or you can request to speak and we can open up your microphone. I'm going to start with a question. So you're fairly familiar with shared workspaces, and I know over time sometimes you work out of shared spaces. What do you see that are some of the most common violations of sensory design in shared workspaces?
Common violations. Well, I think from a couple different perspectives, the most common violation is not thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Really that, and as a business leader, I know that my biggest competitor is not another architect or another advisor, but the null set, meaning that folks are fitting out space or designing space without thinking about it. And then I think. I don't know, from a design perspective and maybe even from a human perspective, I think that people are pretty inattentive on acoustics, and that's a combination of not thinking about it enough in the design phase, but also not giving people enough design or architectural environment cues about how to behave. Because for almost all of these multisensory features, there's a piece that is coming from the architectural environment, and there's a piece that's actually coming from other occupants, right? And so I think that acoustics, even I'm thinking about myself right now and who can hear around me, but as soon as we start speaking, we're not listening to the experience that everyone else is having. So I think that's probably one of the biggest offenses.
Yeah, I think some of these are tricky because, to your point, they can be managed through design, and that's sometimes easier as long as you think ahead. And then some of them have to be managed through culture, like where is it appropriate to take a phone call, or how do you help someone be self-aware when, even though they're in an office, everyone can still hear them on their conference call. Right,
and certainly space management as well.
Yeah. What do you think, from our perspective, what are some of the things that we can think about that are maybe most high impact in a shared space?
I do have to advocate for thinking about toilets and restrooms.
I can tell from your restroom.
I know I say it all the time. I'm sorry, but it just is so easily hidden, both culturally as well as even in the real estate world. And if you don't have a full floor plate, the restroom may actually be outside of the space that is considered yours, but that doesn't mean you can't take an opportunity to impact it. And we talk to folks who do recruiting, and going to the restrooms is something that everyone does, even might be something that a recruit or a prospective tenant is going to that space, and they're thinking about that space as part of their time in that work environment. And they're using it as a significant indicator to think, how does this organization think about its occupant, or how does this organization think about me as an employee?
We had a tour one time who I remember basically went straight to the restroom, and I couldn't kind of figure out. He's like, well, that's really what I needed to see, because in his mind that was reflective of how well the space was taken care of and sort of the overall experience. And I was like, most people probably don't think that way, but in terms of the tour experience, but I think it impacts down the road, to your point, their comfort level over time. And you're probably right about not thinking of it. I was at a restaurant last night, and I went to use the restroom, which in your example, it was not, within the restroom boundaries. You had to go into a hallway, and it was a complete disaster. Everything that was wrong with it was wrong with it. The soap dispenser didn't work. There's no toilet paper, whatever. And I went in and I found someone, and I said, listen, that's a really terrible reflection of your brand. I know you don't control it, but your customers probably think that you do. And fix that. And I'm sure they thought I was Looney Tunes. And but I was like, this just doesn't match with the experience in the restaurant, and it's not good.
Yeah, the research shows that it's actually something that everyone is incorporating into their way of thinking about it, whether or not they're as articulate about it as the person you mentioned. Also, particularly in kind of hierarchical relationships like the work environment, or that people are looking, the occupant is looking for gaps in that experience. They're looking for kind of clues about the talk, and they're trying to find out if there's a match, or if there's a mismatch, and they really are looking for cracks. One of my favorite places and examples is Disney World, Disneyland, the kind of vision of Walt Disney, which I think is something that is exemplar in being orchestrated from beginning to end, and really, you can't see any places outside the park. Once you're in the park, everything has been attended to. Everyone is in costume, and so part of this magical place that is Disney is exactly that there aren't gaps between all the different sensorial clues that you're accumulating as you experience the environment.
Yeah. I think visiting places like that is important in our roles, because I think we often get very used to our own environments and can't see the gaps unless they're glaring, like a bad smell. Or I love visiting other workspaces, and my recent thing was fresh flowers. Nothing makes me happier. That's probably part sight. They shouldn't be too fragrant, I suppose, but I think that's really a sensory thing that I love. And so we started doing that in our space. And you don't sort of know that you're missing some of those things until you see them elsewhere and think about incorporating them.
Yeah, absolutely. Flowers are a great example. You might think of them as kind of a high test or high power example, because they check off so many boxes, right? So they're visually stimulating, their color, their smell, their freshness is kind of it becomes an access to nature piece. So from either a biophilic design perspective or this multisensory design perspective, there's just one thing that is accomplishing several things. And especially if we're, getting them for a colleague whose birthday it is, or recognition, or something fresh for everyone, it does do all of this kind of social communication of that value of the occupant. And I think that you're right. Whether it's a great trip to Disney or a mediocre trip to the restrooms at a restaurant, being out in the non-workplace world and looking for cues and ideas, and kind of having, you know, either your social media feed, or, you know, the notebook that's in your head, kind of building up a collage of different things that you see, creating these experiences that you want to have. And I think there is more and more opportunity and need than ever before to pull those experiences from hospitality environments, from resort environments. And, you know, I sometimes, you know, kind of joke or ask people where they spend a lot of time and energy and effort to get to, with the kind of base answers to go on vacation.
Right.
But if you think about commuting, we spend a ton of time getting to work every day. So really to make that workplace a destination, a place that people want to go, and that it has those features that they'd quite honestly be willing to travel for.
Yeah, no, I love that perspective. So I'll mention one quick thing. If anybody has any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat box. So I saw Melissa's presentation in New York at the Workspace Association of New York meeting, and there was a guy there from Scent Systems by Yankee Candle.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a great tie-in, because I was staying at the Westin, and I'd been standing in the elevator sort of smelling that white tea scent that they have, and thinking, it's so interesting, you know, when you're standing in the elevator, you just know you're in a Westin. And I like Westins, and I've been to their spa a couple times, so really positive association. And to think that you can do that now sort of in pretty high tech ways. They can run it through your HVAC, they can customize it based on room, and it's all you can run it. They have an app that you can run it on. And they were at our recent conference. And so it's kind of a lot of GWA members are looking into that. You can customize the fragrance to sort of align with your brand. They do a brand questionnaire and help you figure out kind of what makes sense for your space and your experience and your brand. So it's neat, some of the things that are kind of happening in these areas.
Yep, I definitely I appreciate that. I definitely give a shout out for Scent Systems, the kind of subdivision of Yankee Candle. Also, probably give a shout out for Sonos and Bose and some of the kind of consumer sound product organizations that are looking to give more and more resources to how we can provide a soundscape in the office environment, particularly post-construction. We were out at NeoCon, did some work with West Elm, and West Elm and Sonos have been doing some partnership work to kind of bring that residential look and feel to your space alongside some sound that also gives you that positive experience.
Yeah, although then the next cultural thing to manage is, who do you let choose the music?
Yeah, definitely something to think about. And there's actually some organizations, both web-based and otherwise, that are focused on kind of constructing or designing sound for purposes of different activities that might be going on in that space, whether that be the need to concentrate or sounds that pair well to make more energetic social environments. So we're seeing more and more kind of engineering and design work at what might be considered the space between music and gray noise or white noise.
Yeah, I don't know if we've talked about this. Is the last thing I'll mention, and then we'll jump off. We use Coffitivity. Have you heard of that app? No, it's designed
I think there was another one we mentioned on the previous call, but I don't think that was the one I'd heard of.
Yeah, so it's basically coffee shop sounds, or like busy, right? It's exactly what you just described, like in between music and white noise, like ambient sound. It's not, I don't think it's quite as sort of scientific as you can pick it based on your activity, but it's kind of a middle ground, which I like. Cool. So, well, thank you so much.
Lots of toys to play with.
Yeah, exactly. I just think that this content is so thought-provoking as we're all trying to architect user experiences in our space. And I love the framework that you put around it. And we will put this up for replay. If you know anybody who missed it, I'll send out an email with the link shortly. But thank you for your time. And you're on all the, what are the social, where should we find you online if anybody wants more info?
Yeah, so we're at PLASTARC is Twitter handle, and then from there you can connect to a number of our other connection points, also plastarc.com. I tweet from Melissa E. Marsh. Don't forget the E in the middle. And we mostly also advocate on our website. There are events, and there's a past events and future events. So if you want to see where we're going, what we're talking about in the future, come and see us in person. Or if you want a review or more information on something that we've done, we're trying to build up, like yourself, Jamie, kind of an archive of stuff. And then my next stop on the tour is moderating WorkTech in San Francisco in a week or so, and then in Toronto the week after that.
Oh, good. I will see you next week then.
I'm practically your understudy since you had done that role previously.
Which was one of the hardest things I've ever done. So I wish you luck. Yeah. Get lots of sleep the night before. And have lots of coffee. That's my advice.
I'm on it. Thank you.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll send out the link in a follow-up email.
Perfect. Take care.
Oh, my boys, my boys.